You've touched on it already, both of you, a little bit, but how have you seen leaders change their approach? I'm starting with you, Jess. What have you seen? You talked a bit about compassion. How have you seen leaders change their approaches in terms of your coaching clients?
They're having to listen more actively, like really listen, because when you're talking about introversion, extroversion, when you're in an office situation and you've got the loudest voices are often the ones that are heard, whereas in this situation, leading in this way, people are listening more actively and having to try harder to pick up on the cues. And so as a result, more people, more of their team's voices are being heard. And so it's been a stretch for the leaders that I'm working with to realize that actually, there are people who are in their teams who perhaps they hadn't heard from, now they are hearing from, and how to manage that, how to be with that, and how to support those people, because they realize that now it's good to help them, give them a voice, to help them to use their voices as well. And I think the empathy piece as well, definitely, I'll go back to that, because people have had to find different levels of empathy as well, because there are so many moving parts, so many factors that come into play now in this new way of working, in this working from home. You're seeing into people's lives so much more than you perhaps would when they come into the office. You're seeing their background, you're seeing what's going on for them. You can sometimes see from somebody's face, when they come onto a call, when they're not okay. And when you ask that question, I think people are more vulnerable as well. So they're giving that answer, and perhaps giving you an answer that you wouldn't normally hear in the office environment. And so as leaders, having to take that on board and support and be empathetic in that way has been, I think, a challenge for a lot of the leaders I'm working with, but a challenge that they're embracing. Actually, I spoke to somebody just last week who was saying that all of a sudden, like, she feels like she knows her team so much better and so much more deeply than she would have done normally, partly because she was normally running around in and out of the office, having calls, having meetings, that leaders who are constantly in meetings. Whereas now, when you're on that conversation, yes, you're on a lot of Zoom calls, but actually you're having different levels of conversations, and you're looking at people like in a different way, because you're seeing them in a different environment, and people are showing up in a different way as well. So I think that there's definitely been more empathy, there's definitely been more compassion, because it's been necessary, and it's a good thing as well.
Yes, yeah, listening is a superpower, and something people think they do, but half the time they're not really doing it. And it's a different level of listening, I think, that you need to do online than you would do if you were face to face. You're missing so many cues that you really need to focus in, and it is a skill, a real skill that I think leaders need to develop. So I completely agree with you there, Jess. Jackee, some thoughts on how leaders have changed their approaches?
I just want to pick up on the listening piece, because if you turn the word listen, if you rearrange the word, it's also the word silent. Isn't that ironic, given what we have, the period we've entered into in terms of COVID-19 has meant that not only are people having to listen differently and in better ways, as Jess has so rightly said, but they're also listening to the silence, which is part of their own lived experiences, to better recreate and recollaborate who they are. And this is where I feel like the real difference is being made. So in relationship to this question, I was just checking the chat, and sorry, was it? Just see who it was who said this so well. Kathy says, in this challenging period, we need to live as if we were born again. Now, when I was thinking about this question around the different styles of leadership, when I'm thinking about my own leadership, for me, the word that really resonates is we have had to step into our spiritual values, the why of why we're here, why we're doing what we're doing, what the impact, the resonance, the presence that we want to leave here, and be more of that. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and recently I've been listening to a lot of TD Jakes, and he said something the other day that made me laugh out loud. He said COVID-19 should not be called COVID-19. It should be called Correction 19. And I was like, I totally get that. Because for so many of us, we've had to do a course correction around our leadership and spiritual values. COVID-19 have given thousands and thousands of people globally an opportunity to pause and reflect. If we think about Black Lives Matter, how that has sort of like come on the back of COVID-19, when it was always there, one of the reasons the world has almost woken up to it is because we were going slower. So we saw more, we heard more, we had to pay attention. And look at the ripple effects that that has had throughout the range of organizations, where many organizations weren't having these conversations around intersectionality, around race, around gender, around homophobia. All of these things we are having more meaningful conversations. And this is about shaping the spiritual nature of who we are and what we stand for. And I think that the challenges around the Correction 19 is actually, we're also up against what I call the organized leader. I am noticing for myself that some people, some organizations are valuing the organized leader more than they are the things that bring compassion and empathy and connection into the space with their leaders, with their frontline workers. Isn't it ironic that the frontline workers have all of a sudden become visible and absolute paramount to the survival of the way of life that will keep us all functioning and thriving and healthy? They have become the leaders that we are all focused on, which really reinforces the point that leadership is not a position, it's not a title. You know, leadership is self-led. It is about your spiritual core. It is about who you are. I said to somebody I was coaching yesterday in a global organization, who do you become? Who are you? Who do you need to be when you are standing for your values as a feminist, as a womanist, as a woman who advocates empowerment for other women? Well, she lit up like a butterfly on the call. I mean, that was it. It was all over, because she knew who she was and she was willing to step into that, to name it, to claim it, and to be it. And this is where I think we are right now. You don't have to have a perfect life. I do not have a perfect life, but you can still be a glorious leader. And that's where I feel the invitation is.
Thank you, Jackee. So we've got some comments here that I just want to draw on. Some really emphasizing your point, Jess, around Jane says, clients of mine are saying they're having conversation with their team members about relationship issues and mental health challenges that would not normally be discussed in the office environment. Both are more open and vulnerable. So this idea of vulnerability being part of leadership. And this is a challenge for leaders who've been told to be bulletproof before, be heroic. And now they're having to say, yeah, I didn't sleep well last night. I'm worried about my child's mental health. I don't know what the future holds or what the next step is. I made a mistake. You know, they're having to say these things. And although it can be liberating, it's you know, the step towards getting there, towards that liberation, it's challenging for a lot of people. Yeah. They're having to you know, take all these layers off of who they've pretended to be for so long, and maybe who they thought they were, and discover themselves in that. So it's not an easy thing. You know, we say it really easily. Oh, just be vulnerable, just be human. You know, share all of your mistakes. These are not easy steps for leaders to take, but we are doing it. And I think, I hope that we take these steps forward and don't take steps back. Jackee, lots of resonance with your Correction 19, divine feminine leadership, where you're hearing about leadership being self-led. And someone asks, Dr. Lorna Cork asks, is it possible to incorporate organized leadership with compassionate leadership? Because you did present it as this sort of dichotomy of two things. Can we have them both?
It's never a dichotomy for me.
Right.
It may come across like that, but that's not how I experience. I'm always raising the question where we err towards one over the other. I always think there is a beautiful balance. Harvey Jackins used to say there's an elegant solution to every problem. I'm always holding the elegance. I know that organization brings a beauty and a fluidity to my work and how I show up. But if I err too much to it, I know that I can lose some of the juiciness, some of the sacredness, some of the spirituality that is very much the essence of who I show up as a leader. So I think it's a very, very useful comment. But no, do not, I might speak strongly on something, but I'm not erring on one side or the other. I want to bring these things into the conversation.